young lovers do. Your heart is changing. Now we don't dance like we used to. Silent disco on the floor, baby. Mr. DJ, he'll get me through. When the beat's gone, you can't save me, baby.
This is Broad Radio. For you, by you. Broad Radio. Here for more.
Hello and welcome to Broad Radio for another Tuesday. It's super exciting to be here. My name's Jo Stanley and my co-host today is the amazing Kel Wilson, who I'm so happy to see.
That's so nice to be here again.
Yeah, it is gorgeous. And gee, Feb.
Just go Feb.
It carries on apace. And since I last saw you, both of our children have started high school.
I still can't get my head around it. People go, oh gosh, he's looking so grown up. And I'm like, he's at high school. And everyone's like, no, he's not. But he is.
Yeah. It's how has Digby adjusted?
He's enjoyed it. He likes it more than primary school, he said on his first day. So that's good.
That's an absolute win. My daughter the same, absolutely loves it. I think year 6 are often, they feel very penned in, a little bit caged. And year 7 for my daughter has been, oh my goodness, look at all these amazing things I can do. The older kids are all making art and music and sport and all that sort of stuff, you know. I'm like, there's a little bit of study in there as well. But, you know, we'll get to that. And then, Kel, I have to share the most beautiful text that I got from my daughter Willow, which was this. She said, hey, Mum, I made a new friend today.
That's so gorgeous.
That's her on her way home from school. She texted me that yesterday.
Oh, God, it's so gorgeous.
So gorgeous. She also said, and then another person asked me to sit with them at lunchtime. And I said, what was her name? I can't tell you. She couldn't. She never knew. She never found out the child's name. I'm like, you know, there's a limit within which you can keep asking. And then beyond that, you can't ask anymore.
And she's a bit young to call everyone Darl as well, isn't she? She can't babe. Or
can you imagine a 13-year-old? G'day, Dar. Good to see you, Dar. Yes. So anyway, it's exciting times.
It's exciting.
Good luck to all of the students who've been returning to school and starting at new schools and all of that. We have a gorgeous show for you today. We're going to be joined by one of the co-hosts of the Great Australian Bake Off, Mel Buttle, your mate.
Yes. I love both hosts. I'm so glad we've got 50%.
I know. We'll get the other one at another time, Claire Hooper, of course. But we have Mel today, super funny comedian, and gosh, that show is just delightful. We also have, and I think the word inspirational and resilience gets bandied about a lot. People talk about that a lot. But the woman who's joining us today is the true embodiment of inspiration. She is an entrepreneur and her story is extraordinary. Stephenie Rodriguez joins us, and we're going to be welcoming to the show a new co-host. She's joining us remotely today, Serpil Senelmis. She is a podcaster and has a super interesting story herself, so we're going to get to know her a little bit as well later on. That's all coming after this. Broad Radio is proudly supported by Chemist Warehouse. Chemist Warehouse, great savings every day. So if you are watching us live, it would be awesome if you would like to share your comments and questions along the way. We love having you a part of our conversation. And if you would like to catch up on any of our previous episodes or even listen to this one again, it will be up on podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Broad Radio on the go. In the meantime, news of the week, Cal, has been, I believe, for me anyway, completely dominated by the Prime Minister washing a woman's hair. And I look at you, I look at myself in the mirror. We have pretty strong relationships with our hairdresser.
Yeah, it's just not a sentence you ever expect to hear. It's like maybe after he's retired, he's decided he wants to become a hairdresser, but you don't just hear about Prime Ministers just washing people. Like,
no. Do you think hairdressing was his backup plan? If the Prime Ministership didn't work out.
now I'm imagining he's got like a mobile dog wash, but it's like a mobile hairdresser's. I should just go behind the Prime Minister's car, just going around offering haircuts to people.
Yeah, it's not a thing you imagine a Prime Minister will do, is wash someone's hair. And I had a visceral reaction to that.
Yeah, so did I. The thing I think that bothers me is it feels quite biblical. Like it,
yes, Jesus did wash someone's feet.
Yes, and then there was Mary Magdalene, who I think washed Jesus' feet and dried it off with her hair.
Oh, that's right.
But it's just something, and I go, is this a religious-y metaphor in there, or is it just a guy with no idea that you should not touch people?
That's it. Don't touch people. And I know that it was a set-up thing, so I'm assuming that young woman gave her permission for the Prime Minister to do that. Okay.
Yeah.
So I appreciate that, but my visceral reaction is that for me, I realised that having my hair washed is quite an intimate thing.
Very intimate thing. Like you don't normally have people touch you on the head like that unless they're your partner or, I don't know, a milliner fitting a hat or something. But
only my hairdresser, to be honest.
Yeah.
My husband would not. I would not let him touch me on the head. That feels weird to me. And so when your head is in the basin, I always find that really a vulnerable space.
of course, you've got your neck exposed for a start. You know, if there's any kind of predator that would like a jaguar or something, they're going to get you right in the throat.
Yeah.
You look amazing as you are eaten. But
So all of that I just found really inappropriate. And I guess I just think, don't touch people. And I find it, my reaction is, why do people, particularly men, I think that they can invade a person's space in that way?
yeah, and I also wondered, did he text Jenny to check if it was all right? Because she seems to be the person that knows how you act appropriately or react appropriately.
Jenny might have said, I'm next. Maybe that's their thing. Very, very out of Africa of them. They do a little bit of Robert Redford, Meryl Streep role play of an evening.
In a khaki jodhpur and a small plane.
Exactly. And they've got a gramophone behind them. They've got a Pride of Lions. You know, they've got the whole scene.
If they would let us into their lives that much so we could find out if that was true, I would love it.
I don't want to know. And honestly, what they do between them, fantastic. But Prime Minister, don't be washing other people's hair. But it's sort of, I guess, a part of the conversation nationally that we're having around, this last year, where we've learned how women are treated in Parliament, where we have, I suppose, asked of our politicians, and particularly the Liberal Party, and particularly this government, and particularly the Prime Minister, a response to how women have been treated around the country, in workplaces and particularly in Parliament House. And I guess we've all felt a little shortchanged when it comes to that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the whole issue of consent. And like of course, the woman having her hair washed is obviously consented. I don't know where I'm going with this. But just that there seems to be a belief that it doesn't matter what you do to women and that we're making a fuss about it.
Yes. And then there's an outrage if you say you don't like it. Then the outrage brigade gets angry that you were outraged yourself. It's all very frustrating, and to me, as I say, that larger conversation now, where this week we have Brittany Higgins and Grace Tame are presenting it at the Press Club tomorrow, which is extraordinary. What an amazing event that is, and for those two women who are so courageous and so incredibly strong and have really carried the nation forward in this conversation around gender equality and how we treat women and children. So for them to be doing that this week, amazing. And today, Parliament House, they're going to be issuing an apology to those who have experienced bullying, sexual harassment and sexual assault within Parliament House. So that is an extraordinary moment, but Brittany Higgins has not been invited to that.
Which seems completely, that says to me, I don't know if it's COVID related measures where you can't have invited guests or whatever, but that says to me that they're not handling it properly. If you can't apologise to the person or have a person there who has told her story so courageously, it's had a massive impact on her life and her employment and her partner's life, and to go, we're making an apology, but we don't have anyone there that actually deserves an apology. It just seems like lip service.
Well, I feel like it's the safe option because they don't want for there to be the photo of her in Parliament House. They don't want for the story to be about that.
Yep.
Or other women who have experienced bullying or harassment in Parliament House, and of which there are more than just Brittany. So I think that they're trying to control the message yet again.
Yeah, totally.
And so for the people who need to receive that apology, it's their right to be a part of that photo.
Well, otherwise it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense to apologise to no one, because you're not really apologising. If you're not actually going, this is really tough, it's going to be really uncomfortable, but this is something we morally should do, you have to involve the person and the people that it affects. Otherwise, it is just for show.
It's a bit empty, isn't it?
Totally.
Yes. Well, our thoughts are with Brittany and Grace tomorrow as they present at the National Press Club, which is incredible. We can't wait to hear and see. It's a sold-out event, but hopefully there will be some virtual sharing of that so we can all kind of experience that incredible moment. I guess we continue on waiting for the results of whatever the election holds, because I feel like this whole conversation is going to have a huge impact on that result.
Totally. And some text messages as well.
Oh my God, the text message.
What a week.
Oh, wow. The state of politics in this country really is extraordinary. I tell you what, let's move on to something that is a little bit more, it's like, I like TV that is food for the soul.
Yes, I also, and for me, a lot of reality television is like pudding.
Yes.
Like, it's just comforting to watch and enjoyable, and you fall in love with the people on the show. And
yeah,
Great Australian Bake Off is one of my favourites.
Great Australian Bake Off absolutely is. I mean, I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here was a little like that as well, and you were amazing on it. But with the Great Australian Bake Off, we get cake as well. So we're very, very excited to welcome to the show one of the co-hosts of Great Australian Bake Off, Mel Buttle. Good morning.
Good morning. I've got to say straight up that I've had a Polaramine, and I think it was a drowsy one, but I'm going to do my best to keep these eyes open for this lively chat.
When did you have this?
When I woke up with some sneezing. So, look, I'm fading fast. It is going to be a little mid-morning nap following this interview with you wonderful ladies.
Oh, well, I've got a mosquito right in front of my face. So there you go. It's all happening here. Hey, we love your show. It is such a beautiful, gentle, sweet, wholesome experience to watch. And it seems like it's that for you guys when you're making it as well.
It is my favourite job I've ever had, and that is not just because of the troughs and troughs of biscuits I get through. But we're genuinely friends, and it blows my mind that I'm in a text group with Maggie Beer and Matt Moran, Claire Hooper and I. And at any point, if I so choose, I could send Maggie Beer a text. That is absolutely insane. But the sweetness you see on the show is what is in the shed. We love each other. We're a family, and the bakers become part of the family every season. It's just beautiful.
It does really seem like a show that forges connections with people. Are you still in touch with any past contestants?
Yes, all of them. Yeah, for sure. I follow them on Instagram and social media because I want to see who goes pro. Does anyone actually go and open a cake shop or get into making wedding cakes? I follow them. I'm actually interviewing a former baker this Sunday live on my Instagram, Barb, who was a couple of seasons ago. She's going to pop on my live and have a chat about where she is now.
Amazing. And then my other question is there any point in there being catering on the show? Like, do they have separate catering, or do they just go have at the bake?
There is catering, but that doesn't mean that you can't absolutely eat both. Sometimes the morning tea comes out and the catering team have made some beautiful fresh muffins or something, and everyone's just like, no, it's brownie week. I don't want I've just eaten 9 brownies. I don't want a muffin. But the rules did change a bit this year with COVID. We weren't as able to just all get our fingers in and shove the food in our face. There were some protocols in place. But we're still eating on an average 2 different baked goods a day minimum.
That is just what a perk. I love this. Another thing I love about the show is that it's 2 female co-hosts. I mean, and it seems no one has spontaneously combusted on set to have 2 women together. What an absolute amazing joy for this to, be the case. And it seems awesome for you guys as well.
Yes, look, the world didn't collapse. We're all good when we both get PMS at the same time. The show just keeps going. We're able to be professional and get on with it. It is so good to have a little friend who's a woman in Claire Hooper who is very smart and very warm. She's the one who gets sent in when there's an emotional problem with the bakers. And she's a mum. So if someone's burnt their caramel, I'm like, Claire, off you go. So we each have our role within it, but it's,
so you're like
the
good cop, bad cop, but you're bad co-host.
100%.
She's good co-host. Oh, okay.
I think so. She's more likely to go up to a baker and give them a hug, whereas I'm more likely to be like, so would you serve this burnt caramel at home? So yeah, I'm a bit more spicy, I think, in the shed. Yeah.
And I saw on because you're sharing a lot of behind the scenes on your Insta, and so it's 3 women who are in charge of the show behind the scenes as well.
That is spot on. Yeah, the 3 head honchos. Look, I don't know what their job titles are. I don't do executive producer of helping and cake toucher, and I don't know what they do. But yes, they are so it's our director is a woman, and the series producer, and the producer of the daily thing. They're all women and they're all excellent, and it is so nice to be on a show where you walk out into the control room and the first thing you see are 3 female faces looking up at you saying, no, the sparkling water is just for us.
Now, it's interesting before you mentioned that, Claire Hooper's a mum and you're not, but on your TikTok and your Instagram, you being a mum has really taken off. So if you haven't seen Mel's videos, they're really funny. You just being a kind of typical Australian mum, how did that all start off?
I think so my mum TikToks are the voice that's in my head, I realised. Not everyone has a monologue in their head, but mine is that woman all day long going, well, if you're not going to eat the apple, don't just leave it on the bench. It'll go brown and that's a waste. Like, why did you even decide you wanted an apple at 5 p.m?
I feel like you just quoted me to my daughter. Seriously, had that conversation with my daughter this week. What am I?
Yeah. You're a mum. You're a mum. Yeah. So it's kind of taken off because I think I'm not the only one who had a mum like that or knows a mum like that. And I thought, I have to get this voice out of my head, and I just have to check if other people ever had a mum who just pushed bananas on them 24 hours a day. And apparently other people do.
And it's the mum who means well but can really just tip over to nasty sometimes, or the criticism, the constructiveness of the criticism becomes very difficult. Like my favourite is when you go to someone's house with your mum and she's just so passive aggressive and just trying to be helpful but also horrific. Like, I'm really hoping for you that's not autobiographical, Mel.
Look, I draw on many sources, Jo. Some my own mum, some other people's mums. It's kind of a mix of a few of my friends' mums as well from school. You know, when you meet other people's mums and spend a bit more time with them, it's kind of that. But they all have that same underlying thing of, well, I'm your mum and I think I know what's best. And what's best is if we just help Mrs. Stewart with the washing up. Like that sort of show that mums put on for other people, you realise that, oh, it's not just my mum that has a special voice and a special let's pretend we take our shoes off inside performance for other people. Yeah.
Actually, my mum had a phone voice. So she'd be like, I've asked you to wash the dishes. Ring, ring. Hello? And she's like, who is this? The public voice.
Yep, we the one that we do at our house is we pretend when we have people over, we pretend that the cat doesn't go on the bench. Like the cat is always on the bench. It's always on the bench. But as soon as we have visitors, I'm like, just act like the cat's got on the bench for the first time.
And what is it about mothers that need to have everything like this false life for the public when we all have the false life? So can we all just be a little bit more honest about it?
I think it's just the old version of Instagram. So mums didn't used to have Instagram. So what would happen is people would come over to your house and your mum would pretend that when she makes spaghetti bolognese, there's always a salad and garlic bread and dessert. So that is just like live Instagram in the 80s is what I think of that as for mums.
Yes. Well, I absolutely love your show. I love the behind the scenes. As far as are you much of a baker, Mel?
Oh God, no. No, I'm an eater. I'm a good little eater. Yeah. No, I can't bake at all, Joe. I can cook. I cook dinner. But I buy dessert. That's what bakeries were invented for.
I know.
Do you bake? Are you a baker, Joe?
No, and I once made a chicken pie, right, from scratch with the pastry because it didn't look hard and we were in lockdown and I thought, why not? And it was okay, but the amount it cost me, I could have bought someone else's chicken pie. That would have been spectacular. And I put that up on the socials and I had all these people say, yeah, but you know what's in it? And I'm like, I don't care what's in the chicken pie I bought because it's nicer. Like, honestly, put MSG in there. Whatever tastes good. I don't care.
Was this one of the first times you'd made pastry, Joe?
The only time I've made pastry.
The first and only time. Pastry is very tricky. Very tricky. Just get the same smugness. This is what I do. I buy a really good packet pastry and I make the filling. And then when someone says, did you make this pie yourself? I go, yes, of course I did. And questions in there. That's the end of the discussion. Yep. So you can kind of get away with it like that. But yeah, it does cost $56 to make anything from scratch, unfortunately.
It does. So, but the thing that I love watching your show with Matt Moran and Maggie Beer, the words that they use. So you're learning about, well, firstly, I realise how utter, like, rubbish my palate is. Because I just go, that's delicious, it's sugary, it's chocolatey, in my mouth it goes. Whereas they're going, the piquancy, the tart. I mean, how many times can someone say moist in one episode? And so you're kind of learning about foods and flavours and the science of it in a completely different way.
Matt Moran, who does all the cutting of the cakes for the Judds, his job as dad of the show is he will slice into the cake. He can tell you from the movement of the knife through the cake if it's going to be any good to eat. I've learned his looks and his sounds now, like you do with your own dad. And I know, I'm like, oh, he does that when it's a bit dry. So he's, he's so good. And you're right, the words they use, Maggie Beer is like, oh, it's a cornucopia of fruit piquancy and delicious vibrancy. I'm like, it's a passion fruit cake, but yeah, sure.
I also like the way they don't appear to get sick of tasting cakes. Like it's still a joy. It's not like, oh, I've done this for so long, I'm jaded. They're all like, oh, no, I would love a Victoria sponge. But
they don't eat the whole cake. They're just eating a little. That's the other thing. How do they stop at just one bite?
If it's really good, they keep going. Even though they still have 9 other or 10 other cakes to taste, they will take multiple bites. And that's how you know it's genuinely really good. When they're on cake number 8, they've got 4 more to go, but they're still having a couple of second teaspoons. That's when you know it's a good one, I think.
I feel like I would need a nap, like in the afternoon if I was working on Bake Off. If I'm trying food, I just need to lie on the ground and digest for a bit.
Well, I do, Cal. I do have a nap when I get a chance. So in my trailer, it sounds more exciting than it is, but in our little room that we get to relax in, I rip all the cushions off the couch. I bring a doona and a pillow from home, and I get under and I put the 3 couch cushions in a row, like in a rectangle, and I get in there and I have a nap. And after lunch until it's time to start shooting again. Does it ruin my makeup and my wardrobe? Of course it does. But I feel great.
So just quickly, you are back on. I saw that you've been performing, and so live comedy's opened up again. And what can we see for you? What's in store as far as your stand-up shows are concerned this year?
They're coming back. They are coming back. I'm doing a week of gigs in Adelaide. If you live in Adelaide, I'm doing a show called the Chixel 500 as part of the Adelaide Fringe. You can go and see that. Brisbane, February 26th, I have a show at Good Chat Comedy Club. And I'm just always at a pub telling jokes. Like I'll be around. I'm back. For it. Just if you're eating a chicken schnitzel, look up. Am I talking? Oh, I'm doing comedy. Great. There I am.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much, Mel. It's been awesome to chat with you, and congratulations on the show. We just absolutely love it, and give our love to Claire Hooper as well. We'll get her on Broad Radio at some point.
Get her on. She's a good broad and a good bird. Thank you. Have a good one.
Yeah, you too.
See ya.
And we'll have more Broad Radio after this. Well, Cal, two things caught my eye about our next guest. The first is she's an entrepreneur and a founder of a really important device and app. She's invented it, really, which keeps women safer when they're out travelling or, walking the streets as we do. And I loved that. But then her story is extraordinary and is a true example of resilience and very, very inspiring. So we're thrilled to welcome to the show Stephenie Rodriguez. Hi there, Stephenie.
Hi there. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. I know that you are on set today doing a photo shoot.
We are. Yeah, we're in Sydney, and we're shooting for Camilla, the fashion designer, for her International Women's Day campaign.
So I really appreciate you making time for us because you're super busy. And Stephenie, women's safety is really, really important to Broad Radio. So we will absolutely speak about WanderSafe in just a moment. But firstly, you experienced an extraordinary, horrific, life-threatening illness, which ended up meaning the double amputation of your feet. And you said of that, I believe this was meant to be my life lesson. Can you give us a background into your illness that nearly took your life and why you say it's your life lesson?
Well, I was in Nigeria working on launching WanderSafe and speaking at an event about the UN Sustainable Development Goals. And the 17th is the one that I'm most passionate about because it's collaboration and working together. And I went to educate young African entrepreneurs about this mission that we have at WanderSafe, but also to talk about this high concept. And I didn't know it, but the last speaking event that I had, we went outside and had photos after the session. And I proceeded to go to India and do exactly the same thing in India, was at the High Commission with the Australian ambassador, women in tech, etc. Came home to Australia on Wednesday, and Thursday morning flew to Boston for a meeting and a bit of a girls' weekend with my best friend. And we were in the airport in Boston getting ready to fly back to Australia on the Sunday, and I didn't make the plane. I barely remember the day, and I have a pretty sharp memory, but it's vague as anything. And when I woke up 2 weeks later, I was in Massachusetts General Hospital, surrounded by my family, my, at the time, 13-year-old son, my mother, who I hadn't seen in many years, and was informed that I had survived cerebral malaria, which is a parasite. And when they caught the parasite, when I was ambulanced out of the Delta Lounge in the airport because I was non-responsive and comatose, it was very difficult for them to figure out what was wrong with me. And cerebral malaria has a 97.7% fatality rate. So that statistic alone is pretty profound. I went into septic shock, and it was in the septic shock, the drugs they gave me to save my life, vasopressors they're called, take all the blood from all of your extremities, your hands, your feet, your face, and shove them to those vitals in those critical moments. And it was in those moments when the blood was taken from my limbs that my limbs suffered damage. It saved my life, but it left me with collateral damage. And that was the beginning of a journey that would be from October of 2019 to now. including more than 365 days in the hospital. And at 365, I stopped counting. It didn't matter anymore. But I did have 36 operations on my limbs to try and salvage them. And unfortunately, after so much work with a wonderful Sydney doctor, Gordon Slater, it just came down to the fact that the bones were permanently damaged. And if I wanted to get out of 22 months in that wheelchair, I had to make some changes and some sacrifices. And the decision and the outcome was to undergo amputations and become osseointegrated, which is like robotic surgery and Terminator surgery, where they fuse metal parts and bone together. Not very pretty. It's a bit high tech and sci-fi, but it certainly worked. And I was upstanding and in a harness, learning to walk again in 2 weeks after the surgery. And will be our 1 year anniversary on March 31.
Gosh, so it's all so recent for you, Stephenie. Like it must have been so surreal to wake up from a coma and just have, like, everything has changed really. Like, have you managed to process everything, do you think? Or do you think that's going to be an ongoing process?
I think the hardest part really was the wake up in the hospital, and to look at where I had been very purpose-led my entire journey. I was at the UN in Geneva in April of 2019, and I stood up and I said, my name is Stephenie Rodriguez, and I'm on a mission to impact 1 billion lives by 2025 and democratize safety in support of the UN Sustainable Development Goals. And I said this again and again and again in 2019. And then at the end of 2019, this happens. So when I talk about the fact that I think it was part of my journey, it really is what I believe, because I had to learn some very big lessons about self-love. And it was waking up no longer a CEO, no longer a wife, no longer a mother. I was a patient with a bracelet and a number. And I stayed that way for a long time, that I really had to come to full circle with being there for myself. And often the way I showed up was with many capes and personas, and then I was just a patient and a very sick, vulnerable person. And that was transformational for me in many ways. I think it will always be a work in progress. I will always be in recovery. I will always need medical help. I'm permanently disfigured, but I don't call it disability. I refer to myself as augmented. And, you know, I have a teenage son. He's amazing, and he's my reason for being. And he said to me in hospital when I woke up, he said, Mom, life is 10% what you're given and 90% what you do with it. Your feet do not define you. You're so much more than that. And he said, you were literally in the jaws of death, and all death got was your toes, the least important part of you. And I was like, okay, if we can focus on that, then that gives us, you know, a means to think about how we address these challenges moving forward.
What an extraordinary way of looking at it. And your son is amazing for saying that. Mm-hmm. I think hearing you speak too about your experience as a patient and going through a chronic illness, I feel like so much of the world's population is in that state of living with a chronic illness, living with a disability, living with whatever their challenges are. But that story is not often told. Those people don't often have a voice. And now you're able to be a voice for people who've had that experience. Are you aware of that?
I never thought in a million years that I would become the face of disability. And I still don't, I'm learning how to do things differently, but it's not limited. And in fact, I mean, I make jokes about it all the time, but I actually have superpowers. I'm going to be the last girl on the dance floor. I will never get a blister, and I can walk on glass and you can't. I'm a perfect size 10 and I'm never getting a bunion. There's a lot of upsides to this, ladies, you know? And I just, you gotta find the positive, find the silver lining. And it is about, you know, the fact that I can walk. In fact, I just was with my son in Belize, and we used to stand up paddleboard. This was like something mom and son, you know, boys like to do stuff. So you can't just sit around and, you know, read books on vacation. It's very active. And all I wanted to do was stand up paddleboard again. And I wasn't sure with my change of balance if I could actually pull it off. First time I tried it, fell into the sea. Second time, fell into the sea. I was so frustrated day 2, I asked the dive shop guys to bring the stand up paddleboard to the swimming pool. this private pool off to the side. And I literally had to stand up paddleboard in the swimming pool and stood there for 20 minutes balancing to work out whether I was going to be able to do this again. So every day is kind of a what's possible versus what isn't possible. And, it's something I refer to as positive patience, because we get stuck in the stuff, the frustration, especially with the pandemic, of what we can't do. And I learned through my experience that you can spend a lot of energy frustrated, or you can spend that energy trying to do things differently and find the yes, if you would. And that's kind of been my resolve through all of this, is it's not going to be the same. So stop trying to make it yesterday. Look at the future and what we can do today for it.
Gosh, that feels a little bit like it should apply to how we deal with the pandemic as well. Like we're not ever going to go back to the way we were, but we just have to deal with what we've got. And you're such an amazing example of looking forward and actually dealing, like the fact that you went to a swimming pool to try stand-up paddleboarding rather than going, I just can't do it. Like I love that resilience that you have. Can you tell us a little bit about WanderSafe?
Sure. WanderSafe was born out of a necessity. I was doing a lot of traveling and speaking at conferences as a digital transformation expert in the travel space. And my clients included people like Club Med, Sydney Airport, Oakwood Asia Pacific hotels in Asia. So I was flying around a lot. And often I would book my hotels online or Airbnbs as a solo entrepreneur and be in places that were terribly unsafe. And I almost got raped in an elevator in Geneva at 7:00 in the morning, wearing a tracksuit and no makeup. And that was pretty frightening. And I was like, why is this happening? And I looked online, and where I booked the hotel online had all these things about great Wi-Fi and clean sheets, but nothing about the fact that it was unsafe for a solo female traveler. And I'd been in Africa, and I'd seen where young women were had their heads shaved and dressed as boys to walk to school because of risk of rape. And of course, in Africa, if they get raped, 99% get HIV and their lives are over. So looking at the plight of women and vulnerable people everywhere, I, took this challenge and said, how can I fix this? And developed an app first that is a wayfinding app that allows you to report when you're unsafe, but it actually allows you to set up an emergency contact list and signal for help 3 times faster, because you can put multiple people on that SOS list versus one call that your device is built for. So you can put a whole safety tribe in there, be it your work, if you're using it with your employer, your flatmate, your partner, your children, and create basically a safety tribe that if you're in trouble, you can activate the app either with a spoken word. So you can say, hey Siri, and if your crisis phrase was hairy banana, something you'd never use in normal conversation, that would trigger Siri. But you can actually set up safe words or crisis words, and that sets a protocol for calling for help. We use technology called What 3 Words, which is global. And these guys in the UK have mapped the world into 3-meter squares, the whole world. And it will tell you in our app, but using this interface, 3 words that describe where you are. It could be apple, road, pineapple. And that would tell first responders exactly where you are, even off the grid. So if you're in someplace like Croatia where you can't read the street sign, or Thailand, or someplace where you can't even understand where you are, this technology that we've integrated will help people find you faster. And in looking at the pandemic, it was originally designed for travelers and people working remotely. But we found since the pandemic a rise of domestic and sexual violence. And there's more of that even here in Australia. And the ability to have a plan, brief in your family, if I'm in trouble and I activate the SOS, this is what I want you to do. So building the app was part one, but I met with a retired CIA counterterrorism safety expert at the beginning and had a conversation with him about what does the CIA teach about safety to get an expert opinion. And he said, fight with light is step one. His name is Thomas Pecora, by the way. And he said, fight with light. And he said, bad things happen in the dark. So if you can put a light on something, it will give you a very good idea whether it's nefarious or circumstantial. Secondly, if you can distract a potential threat. And I was like, what does that mean? And he said, well, strobe light. If you put a strobe in someone's face, their ocular nerve overrides their brain's intention So putting a strobe in someone's eye, their brain just goes, there's a strobe in my face, make it stop. And finally, a siren, 130, 140 decibel siren activated in a tiny click will either attract a lot of attention or scare something off. So these are de-escalation steps. And if you have a personal safety device at the ready, charged on your person, you're 87% less likely that an assault will eventuate, because most of these crimes are crimes of opportunity, not crimes of intention. So likelihood that somebody will go and find an easier mark because they don't know what you're going to pull out next. But the device also has a silent SOS button, a big one. And when you press that button 3 times, it opens up the app and starts sending those SOS notifications from a lock screen. So an intimidator could literally be holding your phone, and you just pick up the little device, press it 3 times, and it's going to start sending those SOS notifications.
Stephenie, it's an extraordinary piece of technology, and I really love it. It's so clever. But, and we've got some messages on, people are messaging online and on our social media. And Michelle Refn, who we love, thanks for joining us again, Michelle. Michelle says, I'm glad to hear about WanderSafe. Hate that we need it, but great product, just download it, right? So I agree with Michelle. My visceral reaction is, why can't we just fix the problem that makes us unsafe? But it's kind of a bit simplistic, isn't it?
Well, the device is very low tech, high impact. And we purposely made it super easy to use, that it works with gross motor skills. So it works with one hand as well. So meanwhile, you might be trying to open a car door or push something away, that you can operate this once you're familiar with the technology. It's really super easy to use. But having a safety mindset, a success mindset is what the CIA call it. So just having that conversation with your safety tribe that you're going to add to the app. Like, if I activate this, what do I want you to do? And, I know in domestic violence situations with some of our users who've shared this with me, they've had a conversation, might be with their mother or their family. If I activate this, call me 3 times. And if I don't pick up the phone, call the cavalry, come in swinging. Because one, you can easily locate someone, but you also, it creates this conversation. So the outcomes are different because someone can feel more confident and have peace of mind that if something's going to go bad, help's on the way and faster than what you can do on your device. And I mean, I love my iPhone. I love iPhone, but trying to get that torch on when you're nervous with one finger and swiping doesn't work. And when you've got seconds, and seconds are going to change an outcome, you want to have something that you can do very quickly that's going to change the outcome.
I really like that term, a success mindset, actually, Stephenie. And it reminds me, and I've noticed, because joining us today also is an amazing woman, Andrea, who's from Self-Defense Hub. I know her because she did a self-defense course with me once. And she taught me that success mindset, that you have to actually lean into the threat and say, no, I'm not going to pull away. I'll lean into it. And in a way, that's what you're doing with WanderSafe. You're saying, no, the threat is there. I'm going to meet it face on with whatever action and success mindset I can have.
And WanderSafe isn't just for women. WanderSafe is for anyone who's vulnerable. And I had particular members of the LGBTQ community say, please don't make this for girls because I want it. And we purposely, with our choices of color and design, made it neutral, and also removed any stigma away from why carry a personal safety device. And I've had male executives tell me, the best fight I have is one that I don't show up for because I always win. So, in looking at, everyone should have one of these. And as far as remote workers, etc., the app is free. And the app doesn't have the light, the sound, and all of the bells and whistles of a personal safety device. But it is an awesome plan B that you can speak to the phone, execute a safety protocol, and get help fast. And also, the fun of the app is you can actually contribute to the community and flag unsafe areas. You can take photos of unsafe things. You can tell it why you feel unsafe, that other users can look into. Like, if you're going to go to San Francisco, Airbnb, you can zoom in and find, is there any feedback on safety in this neighborhood that I'm thinking about renting an Airbnb? Is it safe for me and my family or my friends? And be able to look at global safety maps. So we're doing some fun stuff with AI and creating a dynamic safety rating that will tell you in real time how safe some place is and the things that you need to care about.
Oh, it's just wonderful. Congratulations, Stephenie. And thank you so much for sharing your story. There's a real metaphor for me around what Stephenie said around, that you had to make some changes and sacrifices when you had your feet amputated. And from there, you've just gone on strength to strength. And in a way, that's kind of life, isn't it? You've got to make changes and sacrifices so that you can then move on to your next stepping into your power, Stephenie. Thank you so much for sharing your story.
Thank you very much. And for anyone who's listening in Sydney, I'm going to be speaking on International Women's Day on the 8th in Sydney at an event that you can find about online. Just go to my socials. And I also have a book coming out this year called Thank You, Mrs. Carter, which is my memoir about my journey through septic shock, cerebral malaria, and a 2-year recovery.
Amazing. Well, yeah, do check out Stephenie, and I really appreciate you giving us some time because I know you're super busy. So all the best with the photo shoot.
Thank you. Have a terrific day.
You too. Take care.
Bye.
We'll have more Broad
Bye-bye.
Radio after this.
Australians know that sun exposure can cause skin cancer, but dermatologists also know that it can cause wrinkles, pigmentation and age spots. That's why you need sunscreen every day. Ask your Chemist Warehouse pharmacist which sunscreen is right for your skin.
Broad Radio. Talking inspo we love, info we need, and sharing more of us. Watch and listen live every Tuesday 9 a.m. Australian Eastern Daylight Savings Time at broadradio.com.au or find us on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube and LinkedIn at Broad Radio Oz. Talk to us live. Call on 1300 8 Broad. Catch up on demand anytime, anywhere, every time, everywhere. On the train, we'll be here. 2 a.m. existential crisis, we've got you covered. Broad Radio, here for more.
Well, we're always growing here on Broad Radio. I'm super excited to have you as a new co-host for us this year, Kel. I'm just loving it.
What fun.
I know. I pinch myself every Tuesday. It's my favourite day of the week. But we have another co-host joining us this year. Her name is Serpil Senelmis, and she joins us now. Hi there, Serpil. Oh, can we hear you? Oh, we've got no audio on Serpil. While we're trying to solve that issue, I will tell you how I discovered Serpil. I want to give them a little plug. I was doing a little search around and I discovered Media Diversity Australia. Have you heard of them?
I had not.
Oh, they're an amazing organisation, not-for-profit organisation that has a whole myriad of journalists and broadcasters, all with incredibly rich diversity. And I did a little search and came across some amazing people, and I found Serpil there. And I'm hoping that her audio might have sorted itself out. Hi there, Serpil. Let's try again. No, we cannot hear Serpil at all. What a shame. While we're trying to solve that, and I'm going to say, Serpil, if you can hear us, just maybe nip out and come back in with your link. That usually sorts it out. But while we're waiting for that to happen, I'll just mention some of the messages that we have had on our socials throughout the morning. It's just been lovely to have everybody join us. A lot of people agreeing that it is a shame that we need WanderSafe, but what an extraordinary thing.
And also, so intentional. I didn't know about strobe lighting making your kind of lizard brain overtake your rational brain. But yeah, all the things, the light, the sound, the safety group. What did Stephenie call it? The safety tribe. Safety tribe. Yeah, what a great.
Yes, yeah, and I think it is about stepping into the success mindset. I really love it. Serpil, you're there.
Hello.
We've got your partner James sorting it out. Thanks so much, James.
I was like, I can hear them perfectly. What's going on?
Well, you are joining us now. We can hear you as well, and it's very exciting that you are. And I just want to mention, so I discovered you on Media Diversity Australia, and then I did, I was like, we had a little catch up. Hilariously, we live in the same suburb, and that's Melbourne for you. And I was like, I'm really excited about you joining us on Broad Radio. And then I thought I'd do a little bit of research into, who you are and your background. And you wrote a beautiful chapter for this book, Roots, which is an anthology that SBS put together. And it just gave me a little snapshot into your childhood. And I thought, would it be awesome if every single person we met could write a little chapter just giving us a little kind of, snapshot of who they are and where they've come from. So I appreciated that you did that because, Serpil, we both grew up in the 80s in Australia and had some very similar experiences, but some very different experiences as well. So explain what I mean by that.
Well, when you read the story, the first thing that you said to me was, hey, my mum drove the same yellow Toyota Corolla as you, and you had the same memory as me, where the three sisters were lined up in the back seat and you'd peel yourself off in that scorching heat because, cars didn't have air conditioners then. So that was our sort of similar experience. And then I guess we both reminisced about, the days of the rah-rah skirt and the balloon skirts and hypercolour T-shirts. I'm wearing my hot pink earrings as a tribute. but I guess that's where the similarities end, Jo, because, my heritage is Turkish. That's what I wrote about in the book, because the book was an invitation for Australians from different cultural backgrounds to write about their experience, that migrant experience of growing up in Australia. So, I was born in a country town in Victoria. I was the first generation Aussie in my family. My family came out from Turkey in 1969. So they call them the waves, the second wave of Turks that came out. So Turks have a really interesting migration story compared to people from other countries, I guess, because it was a period of time when the Australian government was sort of questioning its commitment to the White Australia policy. And they drew up this bilateral agreement with Turkey in 1967 because Australia was really desperate for skilled migrants at the time. And they made this agreement which meant that Turkish skilled migrants could come across at the cost of the Australian government, and they would be put into welcoming centres, and then they would go off and start working and help build the Australia that we know and love today. And so that was a temporary migration agreement. So that sort of happened between 67 and 74. And the idea was that people would, work, make some money and go back to their home country. And none of the Turks coming across at the time ever thought that they would stay in a foreign country. Their idea was, we'll make some cash and then we'll just go and set ourselves up in our homeland. But that didn't happen. The majority of those 19,000 people who came out in that sort of early period actually stayed. And I'm a product of that sort of migration story. My family oscillated between going and coming and going and coming. I mean, my parents attempted to go back multiple times. I was taken back when I was 8, 13, and then each time they ended up coming back to Australia. And so Australia became home. So, I guess that's where our 80s experience changes, because in the 80s, I went to a different primary school every year. And that included, I think, 3 states and a trip to Turkey as well. So that, in a nutshell, is the differences, I guess, Jo.
But you were changing primary schools because you were following your parents around the fruit picking seasons.
Yeah, that was part of it. So my dad was a furniture maker, a carpenter, and in the off season, I'm going to call it, their holiday season, they would also do picking. So we would travel across the east coast because that's where most of the jobs were. You'd pick grapes in Mildura, and then you'd go off to Griffith. I can't even remember what we picked in Griffith. You'd go to Gatton. I've got these strong memories of, these country towns where you would just set up camp. My mum had this hilarious setup. She was so Turkish. So we would, the caravan was the house, and you had to take off your shoes, and, you had to keep it all clean. And then she had an annex tent, and in the tent, it was her kitchen, and we weren't allowed to enter the kitchen. So she'd have it all set up like a proper kitchen, and it had to be pristine. And then we'd have like a play tent next door. So we just took up this entire caravan park. And, I was collecting caddies and just having a great old time in those country towns. It's a really sort of strong memory in my childhood. It was a wonderful time.
With going back to Turkey, has that meant that your heart is sort of in two places? Like, do you feel like Turkey is also your home, or is it definitely Australia?
Cal, that's a really interesting question. I know that part of my heart is in Turkey. When I hear like Turkish music, it creates this really emotional response within me, and I'm like, oh, I've got a really strong connection to that country and that land. But at the same time, home is a really interesting concept. I think home is what you make it, because when I'm in Australia, I don't feel completely at home, even though I'm born here, because certain people tend to remind you that you're not really Australian, and that sort of taints it. But you have the same experience when you go back to Turkey. They'll say, oh, what's that strange accent that you're speaking Turkish with? Where did you come from? And it's like, oh, first generations feel a bit like an alien. I was talking to a girl from an Indian background last week, and we've had completely different migrant stories and experiences. But one thing we agreed on was, as first generation children of migrants, you really don't sort of belong in either camp. And you know what? That makes you unique, and you find your own place in the world, and it's your superpower, because you can sort of dip in and out of both countries and both realities.
But where does your heart lie, New Zealand or Australia?
Both. But I just talk about them both as home. And home is the context, whether you go, oh, that's Melbourne, or whether it's New Zealand. But I totally get that that feeling of not quite fitting in. So is it? It's like you get to observe more because you're the outsider. Like, would you say that was true for you, Serpil, as well?
Yeah, I think so. You sort of absorb all of the customs and rituals, but you can also bring a completely different angle on it. And it's a bit like, when you start a new job and you go in and people go, oh, we do it like this. And you go, but why? Why do you do it like that? And you sort of question it. You get that advantage. It is a superpower. You're like, but why? You can do that for both camps.
So as someone who, I've never lived in any other country, in fact, I've never lived anywhere but Melbourne. That's how sheltered I am. So I guess I have blinkers everywhere I turn, really. I mean, that's what unconscious bias is. So my question, I guess, Serpil, is, are we as a country less tolerant of other cultures and immigrants now than we were when your parents came?
Look, I think it's shifted, but I think I can only speak on with my own experience, because the migrant experience is so different based on how you ended up in this country and why, what your motivation for coming was, and where you come from, like your skin color, your accent. All of that makes a difference. So there's a hierarchy of migrants, and depending on where you come from, you might be treated better. The lighter your skin, possibly you're treated better. The more Anglo your name, you're probably treated better. And these are the facts that we know. But I mean, in terms of, are we more tolerant than other countries? I would say each country has its own racial issues based on history, and history is usually, who did they go to war with, and who did they have diplomatic arguments with, and there tends to be sort of bias or racism in every country, I think, but it's not the same.
Well, I mean, to me, the interesting thing when you speak about your parents coming, they stayed in Villawood, which now is a notorious detention centre. So yeah. I feel like what's become of us for that now to be how we welcome people from overseas, welcome being, I'm using that word incorrectly. It's so different. It's so interesting that that's changed so much.
I do jokingly call it the once upon a time welcoming centre, because it was a hostel, and you got to actually stay there for 2 years. It was a really supportive migration agreement. So you could choose to stay there for 2 years, or you could leave earlier and rent on your own terms. So my parents left after, I think, less than 6 months because they wanted to have a bit of independence. But if they wanted to stay for 2 years, their food was catered for. They had the safety and security of somewhere to go to. I think, that's obviously shifted over time because of the rhetoric we hear about the boat people, I suppose, and refugees. And I know that refugees is a very different experience to migration, but refugees are fleeing for their life. So they're not choosing to migrate for economic purposes. And it's interesting when we need migrants, the conversation again has shifted at the moment because speaking of fruit picking, we're short of fruit pickers at the moment and they're having trouble finding fruit pickers at the moment. And suddenly, we're looking overseas to, who can we get to come in to do this work? So I feel like we have this tricky relationship with migration when we're desperate for workers. We're opening our arms to welcome people in, but when we feel like, we don't need them, we revert back to, they steal our jobs. So you can't sort of have it both ways, I don't think.
Amazing. Well, I'm thrilled that you're joining us on Broad Radio. Actually, I need to mention that Eche, who is one of our regular viewers, I love her. She says, I too came out in 1970 with my parents from Turkey. No English, no money, but full of hope. Look at that. I love that. Serpil, yes, you're going to be joining us next week, actually, right here next to me. And, maybe we'll wear a rah-rah skirt each in honour of the 80s that we grew up in. I wasn't allowed to have a rah-rah skirt. My mum was like, no, that's just crazy fashion. You don't need that. Only sensible clothes for you.
Did you, as an adult, end up getting a rah-rah skirt?
I bloody did. You knew it. Did you have a rah-rah skirt, Serpil?
I did. I hounded my mum so hard that she said, no way, that's ridiculous. It's so expensive. And then she sort of went into the shop and studied it and went home and sewed one for me. Bless her. So,
impressive. Yeah. I love that. We'll see you next week, Serpil. Thanks so much for joining us on Broad Radio as one of our new co-hosts. I'm super thrilled.
Thanks for having me.
See you next week. And that brings us to the end of the show.
It's gone in a flash show.
It really has. But firstly, we have to mention that you're joining Kirsty Weebeck on one of her Zoom comedy hours.
Yes, so Kirsty Weebeck, 11th of February, that is Friday.
This Friday.
I know. How did that happen? I don't understand how it's February. So Friday the 11th, if you go onto Kirsty Weebeck's socials on Instagram and Twitter, she'll have details of how you can get tickets for that if it's not already sold out, as they tend to be, Kirsty's Geeks. It's the best Zoom gig that I do. I love it.
It's super fun, and honestly, there's no need to leave the house when you've got that kind of entertainment just being beamed into your lounge room or bath, wherever you might be.
There was someone watching from the bath. There was video footage discreetly of someone watching from the bath. I'd be too worried I'd knock my laptop into the water. But
yes. So we will check you out on that, as well as Kirsty and Jude Pearl, who we love as well.
Love Jude Pearl.
Super funny. Thanks so much. I think we're seeing you next sometime in March, which I'm really looking forward to. And you're touring around and off to Adelaide Fringe.
Yes, Adelaide Fringe, and then there'll be the Melbourne Comedy Festival. My show's called I've Gone to a Lot of Trouble.
And you have, I'm sure.
I do. Always.
And we'll be back with Broad Radio next Tuesday. In the meanwhile, have a fantastic week. We'll see you then.